You're about to witness a moment the media never expected, and a courtroom will never forget. An arrogant judge thought he could mock a woman of integrity in broad daylight, but 5 minutes later, he was the one in handcuffs. What started as an insult became a national reckoning, led by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a former defense attorney who's no stranger to standing alone for what's right. In this courtroom, she wasn't just defending the law, she was defending every American who's ever been silenced, humiliated, or ignored by the system. And when the judge crossed a line, he thought no one would dare challenge. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth. This story is bigger than politics. It's about justice, integrity, and what happens when one brave woman refuses to back down. If you believe no one is above the law, not even the judges themselves, hit that like button now. Comment "Justice Matters" below if you've ever felt the system protects the powerful while trampling the rest of us. And subscribe, because this channel isn't just about stories. It's about reminding America what courage really looks like. Now lean in. Because what Jasmine Crockett did next left the entire courtroom breathless. It was a cold Monday morning in Washington, D.C., the kind of morning where justice feels distant and power hangs heavy in the air like fog. Outside the federal courthouse, protesters clutched handmade signs, reporters huddled under umbrellas, and an old veteran leaned against the marble column, watching. He'd been here before. Different faces, same feeling, truth on trial. Inside, the room was filled to capacity. Reporters with furrowed brows, elderly spectators with folded hands and sharp eyes, and somewhere in the back row, a retired school teacher whispered a prayer, because everyone in that courtroom knew something wasn't right. At the center of it all sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, but today she wore no pin, no politician's smile. She was here as special prosecutor, appointed after the DA mysteriously recused himself just days before. She was here to prosecute corruption, and she came armed not with anger, but with evidence. The judge entered. Howard Gates, a man whose name stirred dread in young attorneys and rolled eyes in the press box. A man once called a judicial bulldozer in a robe. Appointed during an administration now long out of favor, but still feared, still untouchable. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the courtroom, and when he laid eyes on Jasmine, he didn't hide his contempt. "Miss Crockett," he said dryly, "I hope you plan to offer more than dramatics today. This court has little patience for political theater." A ripple of smug laughter moved through the defense table. One attorney even leaned back, hands behind his head like a man watching an old movie he already knew the ending to. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She stood. "Your Honor, the only drama today will come from the facts. And the fact is, millions of taxpayer dollars were funneled through shell corporations into private pockets. I intend to show you how and who signed off on it." The silence was thick. Someone coughed in the gallery. A pen dropped. And then Gates chuckled. "Taxpayer money? That old tune?" He leaned back. "Let me guess. You've got a stack of Excel sheets and blurry PDFs. Let me save you time. This court won't tolerate grandstanding, so spare us the lecture." Now the tension was real, palpable. Even the court reporter's fingers paused above the keys. Jasmine walked forward, slow and steady. She placed her first binder down on the table. "This is not a lecture. This is a ledger. The one your court requested 2 weeks ago and the one my office subpoenaed before it mysteriously disappeared." Gates didn't blink. "I see no mystery. Maybe you misfiled it. You people have a tendency to lose things." The gallery gasped. The phrase "you people" hung in the air like poison. Jasmine froze, but only for a breath. "With all due respect, Your Honor, we didn't lose it. We found it, buried in a private server under the defendant's accounting firm, locked behind 3 levels of encryption." The defense attorney stood up. "Objection. This was not included in discovery." Jasmine didn't turn. Because it was hidden, and now it's here. Gates slammed the gavel. "Control your courtroom, Miss Crockett. You're not the star of a courtroom drama." Now the crowd stirred. Whispers, phones texting. One old man near the aisle clenched his jaw. But Jasmine? She remained a rock. "I'm not the star, Your Honor, but I will be the truth." She opened the binder. Slide 1, a simple invoice, dated, signed, paid in full to a company that didn't exist before the contract. Slide 2, a city permit signed by the developer and co-signed by a local official whose name had never appeared in this project before. Slide 3, an internal document, redacted but not enough. And then came the silence, because in the lower right corner of that third document was a signature with weight. Judge Howard Gates. His face didn't move. His fingers tapped the bench slowly. "This proves nothing," he said. "Then why does it make you nervous?" Jasmine asked. A collective gasp. The courtroom didn't erupt, but it vibrated. Even the stenographer paused, her eyes flicking up from her machine. Jasmine stepped back. "Your Honor, this is just the beginning. The corruption didn't just involve developers. It had protection inside this courthouse." Gates slammed the gavel again. "Enough. I will not have my name dragged through this circus. You're one more comment away from being held in contempt." Jasmine smiled for the first time. Not mockingly, not arrogantly, just quietly. "Do what you must, but I won't stop showing this courtroom what justice looks like." And with that, she reached into her case and pulled out the next folder. Behind her, in the gallery, the old veteran whispered, "Looks like she came to fight." A quiet tension hung over the courtroom like a held breath. The judge's gavel still echoed faintly in the ears of everyone present, but Jasmine Crockett didn't waver. Her presence was steady, like an iron rod driven into the heart of a trembling city. The room was waiting for her to flinch, to fold, to apologize. But instead, she turned the page. "Your Honor," she said calmly, holding up another document, "this is a payment authorization order. It's dated 3 days before the Budget Committee even approved funding. And the co-signature?" She paused, lifting the document. "Same as before, yours." The crowd was silent, but the tension was deafening. An elderly man near the back muttered a quiet prayer. A woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The walls of the courtroom, once so stern and impersonal, now felt like they were bearing witness to a reckoning long overdue. Judge Gates leaned forward. His face was stone, but his eyes betrayed something. Unease. "Miss Crockett, if you continue this line of accusation without proof of intent, I'll be forced to consider your actions a violation of court protocol." Jasmine didn't blink. Instead, she turned toward the gallery. "May I remind the court," she said, voice strong but composed, "that intent is not required for misuse of public funds. Negligence, Your Honor, is enough." The crowd murmured. Somewhere in the press gallery, a journalist tapped out a headline. She placed another file on the screen, a scan of an email chain. "This email," she explained, "was between the developer's financial team and a legal advisor who was, at the time, also serving as your personal counsel, Judge Gates." Gates opened his mouth, but no words came. The moment stretched. "You want to play games with legality? Fine," he growled, "but I won't allow my courtroom to become a stage for conspiracy theories." "This isn't theory," Jasmine replied. "It's chain of custody confirmed evidence, and if the court has any remaining integrity, it will allow it to be admitted." "Objection!" the defense barked. "Overruled," Gates snapped, then realized what he'd just said. His eyes flared. He clenched the bench so tightly his knuckles paled. Jasmine pressed on. "The corruption isn't just financial, it's procedural. Your Honor, the same individual who approved these transactions also delayed the discovery process by 17 days, long enough for key files to be deleted from 3 separate servers." "You're out of line." "Then put me in contempt," she snapped, finally raising her voice. "But I will not allow this bench to bury the truth one more time." The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in fervent energy. People were no longer spectators, they were witnesses. Judge Gates stared at her, and for the first time, he looked unsure. "This hearing is suspended for the remainder of the day," he declared. "No, Your Honor," Jasmine said, "it is not." Gasps rippled through the chamber. A murmur of approval grew. People stood, not to leave, but in quiet defiance. An elderly woman in the front row stood first, cane in one hand, the other clenched in a fist. "She's right," the woman whispered. "Let her speak," said another. And then voices joined in one by one. "Let her speak. Let her speak." The room swelled. Judge Gates's gavel struck the wood, but the sound was drowned out. And Jasmine? She stood taller. We are not your enemies, Your Honor. We are the people you serve. And today, we're watching. She stepped closer to the bench. You can shut down cameras, you can order recess, but the truth doesn't need permission. She turned back to the crowd. Because when justice is threatened from the top, it must rise from the bottom. Applause. Not the kind that bursts from joy, but the kind that rumbles from deep conviction. And somewhere in that sea of faces, the old veteran who had whispered earlier, he was now standing too. Fight on, ma'am, he said aloud. Fight on. It was as if the temperature in the room had changed. Judge Gates sat rigid at the bench, his once confident posture slowly eroding with each passing second. The crowd, once docile, had awakened. A tide had turned, and the one thing men like Howard Gates feared most, the unfiltered eye of the public, was now focused squarely on him. Jasmine Crockett knew the window was open, not wide, but enough to move forward. Your Honor, she said, voice measured and unwavering, if the court is unwilling to hear the rest of this evidence, then I request it be heard under public review per Emergency Statute 18B of the State Judicial Code. The judge's gavel slammed down hard. Denied. That statute does not apply to open hearings. But the truth does, she replied, and it has already entered this room. She held up a small object, black, rectangular, and ominously simple. This recorder, she said, turning slowly toward the jury, contains a voice memo recovered from a wiretap executed with full legal authority by a federal judge. It includes a voice asking someone to hide the ledger, to shut her down. The room shifted again. All eyes darted between Jasmine, the judge, and the recorder in her hand. Jasmine pressed the button. A voice filled the room, gritty, distinct. Make sure Crockett never sees that ledger. If you have to delay the hearing, do it. Kill the submission. The voice was unmistakable. It was Judge Howard Gates. The courtroom was frozen. Not even the reporters typed. Judge Gates's face turned a shade paler. His mouth opened, then closed. That tape is inadmissible, he managed to say, voice thin. On what grounds? Jasmine asked. The warrant is signed, the source was cleared, and the person speaking is you. It was taken out of context. Then give us the context, Judge. Please. The people are listening. No response. Let me add more context then, Jasmine said, her voice intensifying. She walked to the projector screen and displayed an email, time-stamped, signed, encrypted, then decrypted. This email shows a thread between your clerk and the financial department of Lawson Holdings. They were discussing altering a judge's previous ruling. That judge was you. A soft cry came from the back row. The woman who'd stood with her cane now sat, hand over her heart. What does that mean? Someone whispered. It means, Jasmine said, turning to face the gallery, that this courtroom wasn't just biased. It was compromised. Suddenly, two men stood up from the gallery, not protesters, not press, federal agents. They moved quietly. One of them spoke. Per Article 241 of the Judicial Integrity Act, and with consent from a federal magistrate, Judge Howard Gates, your immunity is hereby suspended pending further investigation. The courtroom exploded. Not in screams, but in movement. Reporters ran toward the doors. The defense team scrambled. And Judge Gates stood, shaking. You can't do this. Jasmine approached the bench. You did this. I just brought it to light. An agent stepped forward. Judge Gates, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and abuse of judicial power. The cuffs clicked, and a murmur, almost a prayer, ran through the room. From the retired vet. Finally. But Jasmine wasn't done. She turned to the defendant. Mr. Lawson, would you still like to proceed with your defense, or would you prefer to cooperate before your name becomes the headline tomorrow? Lawson stood, visibly shaken. I want to cooperate, but I want protection. Then tell the truth, Jasmine said. It's the only thing that will protect you now. He nodded slowly, folding in his seat like a man whose world had collapsed. The judge was gone. The gallery was standing. Reporters were shouting into phones. And Jasmine Crockett stood at the center of it all, not in celebration, but in resolve. She turned to the jury. this trial is not over. Because this wasn't just a case. This was a curtain pulled back. And now that we've seen what's behind it, we don't look away. The courtroom didn't just react. It awakened. As the metal click of the handcuffs echoed into silence, the gallery no longer saw a bench. They saw a stage collapsing. The robe, the gavel, the pretense of honor stripped away in seconds. And in that place, Jasmine Crockett stood, not just as a prosecutor, but as a reckoning. The bailiff returned to his station, his voice shaking as he tried to maintain order. But there was no stopping what had already begun. Everyone remained seated, he called. But people were standing, some in shock, some in vindication, some with tears in their eyes. A woman in her 70s gripped her cane with both hands, not for balance, but to keep from collapsing under the weight of emotion. "We waited too long for this," she whispered. Jasmine turned toward the prosecution table and picked up a second folder. This one was different, thinner, worn. It had been with her from the beginning, but only now did it matter. She addressed the jury. This case started as an inquiry into financial misconduct, but what we've uncovered here is a systematic attempt to dismantle accountability within the justice system itself. She took a deep breath. Judge Gates is only the beginning. The courtroom stilled again. "Mr. Lawson, you said you wanted protection. That means you're ready to cooperate." Lawson nodded nervously from the defense table. "Yes, I am." "Then read this." She handed him the folder. Lawson flipped through the first few pages, his expression falling piece by piece. These are my emails, internal invoices, schedules, even what?" Jasmine asked. "Even the meeting notes with Judge Gates." The crowd gasped again. "He told us what to delay, what to hide. He said he'd sign whatever needed to be signed, as long as he got his cut." The defense attorney attempted to interject. "My client—" "Your client," Jasmine cut in, "is no longer yours. He's a federal witness now." 2 U.S. Marshals approached Lawson. "Sir, please come with us. We'll debrief you at the DOJ facility." Lawson stood slowly, his shoulders sagging. "Tell the jury everything," Jasmine said. "Tell them who else was involved." City council members, the zoning board, a few folks in the mayor's office, even a clerk in this courthouse. The walls seemed to groan under the weight of the revelation. "And how long has this gone on?" 10 years, maybe more. Jasmine turned to the gallery. 10 years. That's how long your tax dollars have been siphoned, how long your faith in this system has been mocked. Then she walked forward, this time addressing not just the courtroom, but the cameras. "We are not here just to convict one man. We are here to show that justice, though delayed, is not dead." She let the silence hang, let it sink in. Then, from the side door, the chief judge entered. "Due to the immediate recusal and arrest of Judge Howard Gates, I'm stepping in to oversee the remainder of this hearing." The gavel passed hands. The atmosphere shifted again, this time not in fear, but in restoration. "Congresswoman Crockett," the chief judge said, "please continue." Jasmine nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to submit this ledger into evidence. It tracks unreported campaign contributions." She turned and looked at the gallery. "From construction firms tied to Mr. Lawson's empire." "Admitted," the judge replied. She flipped another page. "And this contract, which was mysteriously signed weeks before city approval, shows collusion between the developer and judicial offices." More murmurs, more tension. But now, Jasmine wasn't pushing against the system. She was leading it. "And lastly," she said, holding up a final piece of paper, "this is a letter. It was written by a junior accountant from Lawson Holdings. It includes a confession, dated 4 months ago. She sent it anonymously. She's here today." A young woman stood up in the back, visibly trembling. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, "but I couldn't be silent anymore." The crowd didn't erupt. They simply listened, deeply, painfully. "This case," Jasmine said, her voice trembling for the first time, "is not just about crime. It's about silence, about how power feeds off fear, and about what happens when someone finally decides to speak." She stepped away from the podium. The gallery rose to its feet, some clapping, some simply weeping, but all standing. The silence that followed was different now, less burdened by fear, more charged with meaning. The kind of silence you only hear once justice has pierced through decades of decay. The gallery stood not just in applause, but in collective affirmation. They weren't watching history. They were part of it. Jasmine returned to her table, took a sip of water, and placed her hand over her heart. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she wasn't just a congresswoman or a prosecutor. She was a daughter of the people, a defender of the ordinary. "Your Honor," she said, turning to the new judge, "before we recess this hearing, I would like to offer one final exhibit." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Jasmine lifted a small black binder, one that had no barcode, no official seal. Just the initials, handwritten on the front, J.C. "This," she began, her voice soft, "was my father's journal. He was a janitor. He never finished high school, but he taught me what justice meant before I ever knew what a law degree was." She opened the binder and read, "There will be days when truth won't shout, but it'll sit patiently in your chest, waiting, and when it's finally spoken, even the strongest lies will collapse in its presence." She looked up, her voice now trembling. "He wrote that after being fired from a city job for reporting a bribe, he died before anyone believed him. But today, in this courtroom, I believe he's finally been heard." In the front row, the woman with the cane wept openly now. Next to her, the veteran removed his cap, clutching it to his chest. "Justice," Jasmine continued, "is not just a verdict. It's a promise. And for too long, that promise has been broken, not just by those who steal, but by those who stay silent." The chief judge leaned forward. "Ms. Crockett, this court owes you more than thanks. It owes you a reckoning. Please submit your findings to the Office of Judicial Oversight. We will be initiating a grand jury review into the broader corruption network immediately." A few reporters gasped. The room shifted again. "Also," the judge added, "I will be recommending that you receive a commendation for bravery and service to justice." Jasmine shook her head. "I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because someone had to." The judge smiled. "That's why you deserve it." Lawson had already been escorted out. The federal agents had begun coordinating interviews with other witnesses. The mood in the courtroom was no longer electric. It was sacred. The young accountant approached Jasmine slowly, her shoulders still hunched, but her eyes finally steady. "You believed me," she whispered. Jasmine reached out and gently took her hand. "You gave us the proof. But more than that, you reminded us that courage isn't loud. It's consistent." The woman nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Outside, the media had grown into a storm. Dozens of reporters, live streams broadcasting to millions. Flags waved, signs rose, and one in particular stood tall, held by an elderly man in a veteran's jacket. Truth takes time, but it always arrives. Jasmine exited the building to applause, not the kind given to celebrities, but the kind reserved for truth-tellers. One reporter shouted, "Congresswoman Crockett, how do you respond to the public calling this the most important courtroom exposure of the decade?" She paused, met the cameras head-on. "I didn't expose anything. The truth was always there. All I did was refuse to look away." Another asked, "Do you think America's legal system can recover from this?" She thought for a moment. It doesn't need to recover. It needs to remember who it's supposed to serve. That clip would later go viral. In the days that followed, investigations spread to 4 other districts. 2 councilmen resigned. 1 judge stepped down quietly. The DOJ launched a federal review of state-level judiciary practices. But more importantly, Americans began to talk again, not in outrage, but in reflection, not in despair, but in hope. In churches, barbershops, and diners across the country, her name became synonymous with something rare in today's divided world: integrity. At her office days later, she received a letter in the mail. It was from the woman with the cane. "You stood tall when the system tried to make you small. You reminded us that justice is not a luxury. It's a birthright. Thank you for making us believe again." And taped to the letter was a single pressed daisy. Jasmine held it in her palm. She closed her eyes and whispered, "This is why we fight." And now, if this story moved you, If you still believe in justice, truth, and courage in the face of corruption, subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment. Do you think Jasmine Crockett should be the next Attorney General? Like, subscribe, share the story. Because sometimes the system doesn't heal from within. It gets healed by those brave enough to challenge it.